whatever it takes for you as a shooter and as an individual to take all of the processes that we are doing throughout a stage and move those into your subconscious, that is when you will excel as a shooter. And the people that are competing at a very high level, they are doing that time and time and time again. Now, I think that again may be a little different for everybody, but in general, I'm talking all of the big things like building a position, getting steady, getting, having your, all of your data ready to go, getting the gun level, when you switch targets, getting, having a good reference point and getting the target in your scope, like all of those things the goal should be to where you are accomplishing that and doing those action items without thinking about it. So, hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to Red, White, and Moose, the show dedicated to the relentless pursuit of excellence. Whether it's behind a trigger, in the field, or just in our everyday lives, everything we do demands precision. And that precision is backed by the best in the industry. This episode is brought to you by Alpha Munitions, Lone Peak, Collis Foundation, Hawkins Precision, West Texas Ordnance, Raven Rifles, and Botnia Solutions. Guys, I've got a roller coaster of an episode for you today. I went and shot the Punisher Positional PRS match this past weekend, and it was a lot of fun. It was a good time. I've been there. I think this is like my fourth or fifth time. I think my fifth or fourth time to shoot that match, and I always really like it. They do a good job there. But it was a emotional roller coaster a little bit for me, and recap a little bit of the match, but highlight some of the things that I learned out of it. I've already gotten a bunch of questions on some different things and kind of highlight some some of the trickier stages or just things that stood out to me. But so getting into it, so Punisher Positional, it's sponsored by Hodgdon. Hodgdon's always a huge supporter of the PRS, and they always show up big for that match. And this year was no different. And I was talking to Beamer a little bit before the check-in day, and just kind of asking how it was. And I've always said, like, I tend to shoot all of the matches that Beamer puts on. I think they're good, fair, straightforward matches. And so anyway, so I was asking him, and but he always tries to get feedback and stuff. And so but he was telling me after last year's match, it seemed that people tended to like the faster pace, more movement, kind of just quicker overall everything. And so that's what he really leaned on this year. And it was fun. It was a super fun course of fire. You were definitely moving quick and a lot, and I love that. And it was polar opposite of the King of Coal Canyon match. So that was nice. And I will say, for those that have been keeping up with the show, I told you the King of Coal Canyon a couple weeks ago was my first PRS match in a while, and it was fun. I had a great time, and I was a little sore. Just the amount of shit you got to carry and just the weight of everything that you got to. I was feeling it. I was sore, and I mean, just all the moving that much with that much shit, it wore on me. But I took the 7 saw again, this one right here on the wall, and I freaking love it. This setup is running freaking just like, I love it. That gun is it's very, very dialed in. It's shooting great. I love how everything is running with it. And honestly, I really couldn't be happier with it. But getting into the match. So day one, and I'll also say this, for whatever reason, I don't think I've ever been to that match where the weather hasn't been just some sort of crazy, at least one day. And sure enough, Saturday, it was hot and humid. It ended up, I think it finished, like when we finished up, it was like 94 degrees or something like that. I was pouring sweat by the time I finished. And we actually ended up going to the zero board afterwards. And I ended up just rolling over, laying down, and I slammed some water because I ended up getting kind of hot. But then the thing that makes this range in particular pretty tricky is most of the time the wind's out of the south and the range faces straight north, and it gives you a real tricky tailwind. And that's exactly what we dealt with all day Saturday. And it was going, I would say average was probably like a 9 to 12 mile an hour. Um, and overall, probably 5 to 20. Not very many 20. Most gusts were in like 15 to 17, somewhere right there. But very switchy on the directions. Just, you'd have a left or right, and when it did switch, it had enough speed that it mattered. So it was just a lot. You were definitely in glass a lot, watching, and generally at this range, I rely really heavy on the Mirage, and that held true for I'd say probably 95% of the stuff that I saw. But there were a few things here and there where just as it was switching in some things, you'd see Mirage going left to right and like the Spall going right to left and some weird things like that. But for the most part, if you could stay on top of the Mirage there, it could kind of keep you on track. Then getting into it, started off the first stage. I think I dropped one shot. I was good with that. Second one, I think I dropped one. And then the third stage, it was a TYL, and you started off, it was two positions off of like a scaffolding setup, and then three positions off of some posts. And the scaffold the scaffold poles are probably like an inch diameter. They're real thin. And so really the play is doing a front plate bag and tripod rear, and getting that will get you really damn steady. You gotta move decently quick. And he had kind of a funky order in there a little bit, so you had to stay on top of it. But shame on me. I've used I like the Armageddon gear, and I had gotten a new one. I didn't really pay attention to it. I forgot to take some fill out, and so I got it on the gun and got set up, and just for whatever reason, it was too full, and I couldn't. I was having a really hard time getting my hand where I needed it to be to get like the proper pressure and to get it like locked in well. And like it's not like it's my fault. It's just a new bag, and I didn't go through and get it set up properly, and it definitely bit me in the butt on that stage. And I ended up dropping 4 shots on that stage. I dropped 2, and then I ended up timing out on I think the last 2, because I was fighting with the tripod so much. I ended up wasting too much time. And so, that was a big deal. And if anybody will tell you this, but just if you're going to run in a match, make sure you proofed it out outside of the match ahead of time. And I didn't do that, and shame on me. I'll get it all like fine tuned before the next one. But and to be honest, I can do it. I'm not super quick at it. It's definitely something I need to work on, but I wasn't really ready, and it kind of bit me a little bit. So for those that don't know, Precision Rifle Series partnered with Impact Scoring. And so Impact Scoring does live scoring for all of the PRS matches now. And it is a really cool system. And so I pulled my phone out, checked where the scores were. Cause I mean, I was like, I'm down a few, dropping a few more on this that I shouldn't have, but let's just check. It was, I think it, and I kind of, because of the way that live scoring, because there's always, people going, and rotations are switching, like, really until the end of the day, not all the stages are, everyone shot the same amount of stages. So I was moving around a bunch, but I was in like 70th or 80th or something like that, a few stages in, which whatever, I knew I would come back, but I was just like, okay, crap. I need to pay attention. I need to, focus in and really knock out the rest of this day just to kind of get rid of that third stage. And so really just kind of focused in. And I think I cleaned the next 4 stages, which I was ecstatic about. Just really dialed in. I was seeing everything really well, just evaluating what I was seeing, and getting a good game plan for the stages. But then, and I'll get into kind of like the mental game portion of it. So that was kind of some of the questions that I was getting afterwards, because this was a bit of a roller coaster match for me. But so cleaned the next 4 stages, and I wasn't checking the scores. I just knew I was moving up. And then the next to last stage, I think I dropped a point, good on there, and then get to the last stage. And this is the match is always fun, but this match always has my number. And it's kind of like a personal vendetta. Like I keep trying to go back and get let a stage get me, and it's only happened 1 year. 3 of the other 4 years, I've had a stage get a hold of me, and the last stage of day one, it happened again, and it was 2 rooftops and a vertical KYL at like 600 yards or something like that. And I mean, in general, it was a very straightforward stage, and I generally do pretty well on KYLs because I can see on plate decently well, and then make little corrections. And the way that the rooftops were set up, you could get a pretty stable position. And so the first one was facing the peak was facing directly at the target. And so I just I extended my sky pod, did a bipod and a bag in the rear, and just shot straight down the peak of the rooftop. And then on the other one, the peak was perpendicular to the target. And so just bag on the peak and shot across it. So, everything was stable. I saw everything, but I ended up dropping 6 points on that, and I just could not get on top of the wind. It is what it is. It was fishtailing real hard, and I was seeing everything and making minor corrections, and I was going left, right, right, left, and it was a real kick in the teeth. I'll tell you that. And I finished. I sent my last shot. I was just like, oh my god. Seth Stevens was in my squad, and Seth had a hell of a match. He was actually winning the match through day two most of the day, and then had a rough stage on stage one, but he still finished sixth place. So congrats to you, dude. That was a hell of a match. But I mean, I was still on my gut, and he walked up and he's like, "Dude, I know you didn't send the same shot twice. Like that sucks." I was like, "Yeah, I was chasing it the whole time, and it is what it is." And I pulled my phone out. I fought my way back up to the top 10. I was in ninth place, and as everybody finished the match, it kept dropping and kept dropping, and I finished day one in 35th. And that one really sucked because I had shot pretty good the rest of the day. And it's one of those deals where I took a step back and I was like, what could I have done better? And the reality is I was watching Mirage. I was seeing where I was hitting and missing and measuring and making the corrections. And there's not really much else I can do. So it was one of those, I just had to say that sucks, but it is what it is. And we're going to have to just freaking lock in day two and do what we can. So that was a bit of a bummer ending the day on that. But
this episode is brought to you by West Texas Ordnance. West Texas Ordnance is a full service custom rifle shop. And that full service custom rifle shop is located on a 2,500 yard shooting range. It doesn't get any cooler than that. They cut all of my barrels for my hunting rifles, competition rifles, test barrels, and they are all absolute hammers. Check out their patented switch-like system for easy, repeatable barrel swaps, or the saw line of cartridges now including the 7 saw, 22 saw, and 25 saw. From their signature series of rifles all the way to their full custom rifles, they've got you covered. Next time you get a rifle going, check out West Texas Ordnance. This show is partnered with Collis. Collis is the world's oldest successful rifle scope manufacturer, so it's no surprise with that many years of experience, they've released their game-changing lineup. The K328i and the K540i truly are game changers. With a 40% wider field of view, they make a huge difference in competition and in the field. I love the DLR models with the easy-to-read elevation turrets, and they've got top-tier glass that provides the ultimate color and clarity. When you're ready to be at the top of your game, you need a game-changing scope from Collis. Check out the K328 and K540i. This show is partnered with Hawkins Precision. Hawkins makes precision rifle hunting components built to help you go further and shoot farther. From lightweight hunting rings to heavy tactical rings to hunter bottom metals and flush magazines, they've got you covered. I run Hawkins on all of my rifles. I've got their ultralight rings, their heavy tack rings, the cantilever mount, one piece mount for PRS, their M5 bottom metal, Hunter bottom metals. I absolutely love it. I run them on everything. Next time you're getting a rifle going, make sure you finish it out with Hawkins Precision. This episode is brought to you by Foundation Stocks. I've been using Foundation's micarta line of stocks for years, and now with their new hybrid line combining micarta, carbon fiber, and Kevlar, you get that dead recoil impulse that their competition stocks have been known for, now in a lightweight hunting rifle that's light enough to take into the woods. I've been running their Centurion and Samson and Revelation, and now I have their Ezekiel and Gideon stocks, and I absolutely love them. Feel less and see more with Foundation stocks.
And we went back to the campsite, hanging out, cooked dinner, and he was like, "Dude, there's some pretty gnarly storms building pretty close to us." And so he was watching the weather like a hawk, and I was cooking steaks and kind of getting everything ready for dinner. We finished eating, and God, I think like 30 minutes later it hit, and thankfully he was watching it. I mean, there were tornadoes, and they were posting pictures of like 2.5 to 3 inch hailstones. I was like, dude, this is about to get western as hell in this freaking trailer. And about 30 minutes before it hit, the big storm that was gonna hit us kind of blew up, and it had the hail and tornadoes and some stuff. And then it kind of, I don't want to say fizzled out, but all the bad stuff disappeared. And it hit with pretty good lightning and rain and winds. It was like 60-mile-an-hour winds. And I'll tell you that in a trailer was a little sketchy, but we made it through and it was fun. And then, so getting into day two, I really just wanted to get day one out of my head and just show up and just essentially focus on doing what I know I can do and just focus on the process. And so with the big storms rolling through that night, it cooled everything way off. I think the high day two was like 72, 73, but the wind was now out of the north to the northeast, and definitely stronger. Most of it was hanging out around like 15 most of the day. It kind of tapered off towards the end, but a totally different wind direction, and it wasn't as switchy, but it was definitely a higher wind, and the direction was more consistent, but the speed was less consistent. Day two. So the big deal for me that I found that helps me, and I mentioned this on the last match recap episode, but I have a checklist that I keep in my bag. That I have a pre-stage checklist and a post-stage checklist that I go through. I have like a cold tack notebook that I keep in my backpack, and it's got my checklist, and then I'll put my matchbook and then pens and a couple other things. But as soon as I come off the stage, I'll get my checklist and I'll go through, each line item, make sure that I get everything done. And like, it's gather and it's going to be different for everyone. Like I do encourage you to make a checklist so that your process is the same time and time again, but your checklist is going to be different than mine. And it's going to be what makes the most sense for you. But like, it's gather the brass, gather all my brass, thank the ROs for being there, load my magazine, and then I'll say and help, in glass, or help the squad for as many shooters as I can, and then I'll move over to the next one. And then I'll get my book back out again, and it's essentially like find all the targets and get good reference points, get all my data, go to my gun, I'll mark my turret, get my parallax windage, get the gun set up. If I'm going to move my bipod or run different bags or whatever, I'll get all that stuff set up. And then I'll come back. I'll watch one person run through the stage, just watching them, kind of evaluating like where they're setting up positions, how they did it, if I want to do anything different, if something worked or didn't work. And then I'll watch as many people as I can on glass, especially leading up to when I'm going to shoot, so I can watch their trace and mirage, and start putting together different things, different plans and some things like that. And then I'll go up to the prop and do a run through and just check everything, make sure the positions that I'm inking are going to work, and bag placements and bipod heights, and all the stuff that you need to kind of check off to make sure that your plan is going to work. But what I've found is when I do that, when everything's going good and you're excited and like, anxious or like nerves are high or whatever the case is, it keeps me out of my head and grounds me and kind of keeps me back on the process of like, okay, well, just go back, load your mag, find the targets, get everything set up, and just go back to, boom, boom, boom. It's the same system no matter what. And then it's the same thing like when something goes bad. And what I tell people, uh, I don't think there's anything wrong with like emotions in these sports because all of us, so many of us put in a ton of time and effort and money and everything into this. And so when you go and you show up, like you want to do well and you want things to go well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being excited when you do well, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being mad when it doesn't go well to an extent. Don't make an ass of yourself, don't make a scene, and some things like that. Just kind of common courtesy stuff. But I tell people, I'm like, man, it's okay, get it out. If you what I'd like to do is if you have a shitty stage, get your stuff, go set it down, and then just separate yourself from everybody. Go take 60 seconds to 5 minutes, 2, 3 minutes, whatever it is, be mad, get it out, and then it's over. Come back and you got to move on to the next one. And if you don't and you let it live in your head, then that's when you start having issues and start carrying frustrations on to the next stage and some things like that. But I really do like the checklist, and I know it sounds boring and repetitive, and it is. And like when I first started doing it, or when I first made it, I keep it in my bag and I'd read it the first 2 or 3 stages. I'm like, yeah, I know it's on it, whatever. But the consistency and just doing the same thing over and over and over does really, really help. And then moving into the next one, and we'll come back to some of the mental stuff on it. But so there was another stage, and this is kind of same thing, stagecraft. But I think this is a good example because it had a bunch of different things. And so there was a stage that it was stage 14, and you had it was 5 positions. You had 2 targets at one distance. It was a big small. And over here you had 3 rocks to shoot off of, and they were all for those just listening, they're very flat rocks, probably 18 inches thick that are, there's one laying flat and then 2 kind of piled up on each side of it. And then about 10 yards off to the left, there's 5 different tractor tires that are in different orientations. Some of them are laying flat, some of them are buried up, some of them are leaning, that kind of deal. And you had to pick, and you could shoot from 3 of the 5 tires or the 3 rocks, and you had to choose 5 positions, and then you were going to shoot the big small from each of those 5 positions. And so on the rocks, what made it interesting was the rock on the right that was leaning, it was flat to the target front to back. It was canted to the right, but it was level. Then the middle rock that was flat, there was no cant left or right, but the front of the rock was leaning down. And then the left target, it had a left cant, but the front of it was also leaning down. And so, and then you moved over to the tires. There were 2 that you weren't allowed to use because there was wires and some support stuff on it. Then there was one that was laying flat that was double stacked tall. And then there was one that was laying flat that was on the ground. So it was like a foot and a half off, 1.5 feet, 2 feet off the ground. And then there was one that was buried vertically that was like a half moon shape. And then you got to pick from those 6. And so a bunch of us, went and evaluated everything. And what I always encourage people to do in a match setting where you have multiple positions, and especially when you get to select how you're going to start off, if you can do it, start off on a bipod and bag any chance you get, because that's going to be the most stable position that you can build, and it's going to allow you to see the most. And when you're making your first wing call, when you're making that first initial guess, anything you can do to be more stable and get more information is going to help you. So with that, I wanted to start on the rocks. So what I ended up making the plan was, and so I use, so I carry 2 wee bad tater tots in my PRS bag. One is a heavy fill and one is a light fill. The heavy fill I use for all my positional shooting, and the light fill I use as a rear bag for prone shooting. And so the light, it makes for a better rear bag, because the bigger beads lock up really well. And so when I got to the first rock, I dropped my heavy bag on the far left rock, then got bipod and bag set up on the first rock, sent a shot, good. Went to the and then got up to move to the second rock, pull my bipod out a couple clicks, so it would account for the lean on the next two. Got there, sent those two shots, went to the next rock, sent those two shots. And that is one thing I'll throw out there. I run the MDT SkyPod for PRS, and I think that is the best bipod, in my opinion, to run for PRS. I run the single pole, the standard length, and now they've got the Gen 3 option, but it's very quick to adjust. And so you don't have to like push buttons or, pull levers or anything like that when you're extending legs. So, moving between positions, I just reached up and it's, click, click. And they have an insane amount of cants built in. So when, I'm shooting off of rocks that have like a 45, 50-degree cant, it's no problem with the SkyPod. It makes it very nice. So then I finished with the first three rocks. And then again, the SkyPod is on an Arca clamp. I just did a half twist on the lever, dumped the bipod, left my light bag, grabbed my heavy bag, went over to the tires and went to the two flat tires. And if you haven't shot off the tires, they're either no problem or they really suck. And it really depends on how big they are and how old they are. And essentially, sometimes the bigger they are, the springier they can be. And the older they are, like the more they break down, they lose some of it. So what I always encourage people, if you can, bipod and bag tires, because it will get you way more stable. But with the way that these were set up, I didn't. So I couldn't run bipod and bag, but I didn't like. It was just going to be a little bit of a funky position because I'm left-handed and where I was going to have to set up. So I ditched that one and just went with the bag. But when you're shooting just off of the bag on these big tractor tires, I would highly encourage you, stay on the edge. The sidewall, if you get into the middle of it, is going to have a lot of flex and bounce. And so when you get into your reticle, it's going to be moving up and down and shaking. So if you can get on that back corner, set your bag up, it should be pretty stable. But ended up, I think I dropped one on that. And so I was very happy with that. But it was it's a great example of just taking into account all of the different positions and how, each one can have its own little nuance. And so, taking a few extra seconds or a couple minutes to go evaluate your setup and your positions can and will help you not have like a total meltdown and like a position falls apart, then you're rushed and then you start dropping shots like crazy. But then the big thing, and so a guy was messaging me on Instagram and he was asking, what do top shooters do, to keep their head in it and stay consistent. And and I mentioned, I was like, well, I talked about the checklist, on the previous episode. He's like, yeah, but I've asked a lot of the top shooters and never really get a straight answer. And so I was going to, try to address that on this episode. And I think that is going to be slightly different for every person, because when you do start competing at a high level in anything, you're nitpicking every little detail and you've got to refine everything. And so it becomes such a mental aspect of keeping, everything between the ears flowing how it needs to be. And because we're all such unique and different individuals in the way we think and process, I do think that's going to be slightly different for everyone. But, and the final process of how you get there. But my answer, and I'm not going to claim that I'm a top tier shooter by any stretch. There are guys that are better than me, but I shoot pretty good. And at least for me, what I would say is whatever it takes for you as a shooter and as an individual to take all of the processes that we are doing throughout a stage and move those into your subconscious, that is when you will excel as a shooter. And the people that are competing at a very high level, they are doing that time and time and time again. Now, I think that again may be a little different for everybody, but in general, I'm talking all of the big things like building a position, getting steady, getting, having your, all of your data ready to go, getting the gun level, when you switch targets, getting, having a good reference point and getting the target in your scope, like all of those things the goal should be to where you are accomplishing that and doing those action items without thinking about it. So when you get to that point, it frees up your mind and your processing ability to focus on the things that are going to matter for that shot. Whether and for me, that's a good clean trigger pull and evaluating, mirage, wind, where that bullet hits on a plate, or if I miss, then measuring and then being able to, you know, take all of that data, process it, and extrapolate what the data is going to be for the next target or the next shot or whatever that's going to be. And so the reason I say that, and the best example I can give is, so if you take someone that is, it's their, I'm not going to say a brand new shooter, but say we take someone that shot two to five like PRS regional 1 days. They're not absolutely green to it, but they're definitely newer. When that guy gets up on a stage, and for simplicity's sake, let's say it's like the PRS barricade, the tiebreaker stage, it's going to be at every match. It's 2 shots, 5 positions, 400 yards. Very basic. But what that new guy, the way he's processing everything is, the timer goes off. He's got his bag in his hand and he's thinking, all right, I'm putting my bag here. I'm getting it flat. That is good and stable. Now I'm setting my gun on it. I'm taking a knee. I'm getting behind it. Okay, I'm going to settle my gun into the bag. All right, now I got to make sure my gun's level. Okay, there's, the target's over there. All right, I'm getting behind the scope. And now I see it. Okay, wind's still doing the same thing. Guns level. Okay, I'm closing the bolt. Good squeeze. Boom. Okay, I saw it hit. Now I'm running it and do it again. It's you're processing and thinking step by step of what you're doing and what the next thing is. Now, if you take someone that's been doing this for years and years and has run the PRS barricade more times than they care to think about, they could do it in their sleep. That guy isn't thinking about where he's got to put that bag on that barricade. He's not thinking about how and where the gun needs to be placed so that it's stable. He's just doing it. It is all processing in the back of his mind. It's subconscious and it's all just working like clockwork. And then what he's actually thinking about is he's feeling the wind on his face, the wind on his back. When he gets in the scope, he doesn't have to think about leveling it. He's already doing it while he's looking through the scope. He's checking out the mirage or the leaves in the trees, and being able to look at the little details to make sure that all of the environmentals are still the same that he was looking at before he got on the gun, so that he can take that shot, send the shot, and evaluate everything. And then if you're moving positions, he's not having to think about, okay, now I'm walking over here, I need to pick that second rock. He's just going over there and he already knows what he's got to be doing. And while he's walking over there, he's thinking about like, okay, well that shot hit a 10th right at 600 yards. And so I need to shave a 10th. That 5/10 would have brought that to center. Now I'm going out to 600 yards. I probably need to add a 10. So I'm going to go back to my 5/10 hole. Okay, and I'm feeling the wind on my back. It doesn't feel like it's really changed. Yeah, I'm gonna go back with that 5/10 pole. And so he's processing all of this stuff of what he saw and what he's about to do next versus all of the other things that he has to get done. And so I generally think the best way and really the only way, at least that I've found, to accomplish those things is just reps. And whether that be like I would, if you're practicing, find that specific thing that you've got to work on, and when you go practice, only work on that so that you're the more you can separate and take specific movements or specific things that you're having to do, and when it becomes second nature and it gets stored back there, then it's just more and more and more processing power at the front of your mind while you're in the action. And so I hope that helps. And that's what I've found in the guys that I talk to that are doing well. I mean, you hear people saying like, getting into flow state and some like that is the best example I can give. And in the stages where, like on day one, and I was like, okay, I need to lock. Really, essentially, what happened was I leaned on my checklist to essentially make sure that my process was the exact same thing, so I wasn't missing any steps, and that way I knew my gun was ready. All I was ready. I had all of my data, and I'd already gone through and processed everything that I needed to, or looked at the where the targets are and what the positions are. And so when it comes time to go, it's just looking at the mirage and looking at the wind and what I've got to do.
This show is partnered with Raven Rifles. Raven Rifles produces artwork that shoots. Their custom lurk Cerakote pattern provides depth and colors that honestly most patterns just dream of. Their limited release rifles are truly a work of art. They're available in limited numbers and guaranteed to be an eye catcher. I absolutely love the lurk pattern. You can see the snow wolf and copperhead patterns on the rifles behind me. They just truly become functional works of art. When you're looking to stand out above the rest, check out Raven Rifles. Alpha Munitions sets the gold standard for rifle brass. Their OCD technology has been the first improvement for rifle brass in decades. I use it for hunting, competing. I use it in the business. Honestly, it's just the easy button for getting your ammo to shoot good. If you're looking to get the most out of your ammo or you want to lower your SDs, make sure you start out your ammo with a good foundation and use good quality brass. Find out why more top competitors are using Alpha Munitions brass in the PRS than any other brand. Next time you're getting your ammo started, make sure you start it out with Alpha Munitions brass. This show is partnered with Botnia Solutions. Botnia makes the most high-performing muzzle brakes on the market. They've got a low dust signature, so you're not getting the crap beat out of you when you're shooting prone. They've got upward-facing ports to help drive the rifle down when you're shooting positional and be able to see more through your scope. I love them. I've been running the MIDI on my hunting rifles and my NRL Hunter setup and couldn't be happier with it. And then when I need the most, I put the Maxi. I've got that on my PRS rifle. And when you need all of the recoil control that you can possibly get, look no further than Botnia Solutions. This episode is brought to you by Lone Peak Arms. Lone Peak makes absolutely amazing competition and hunting actions. Their Razor Infusion line is available in short and long action, left or right, and stainless or titanium. I've been running Lone Peaks for years, and I've run them in snowy, muddy, sandy conditions, and they just keep on ticking. Your action is the heart of your rifle, and make sure you're starting it off strong. Next rifle you get going, make sure you start it out with a Lone Peak action.
So I hope that helps on the mental side of things. And it definitely helped me. And day two finished up shooting. I shot really well day two. I dropped I think like 6 shots day two or something like that. And I almost made it back to the top 10. I ended up finishing third. Yeah. So I had to go back and check the score. So yeah, I was in a three-way tie for 11th and 1 point out of the top 10. So I will take that. And I ended up getting 92.161 PRS points. And so I'm sitting pretty much like right at a 180. And so I need to get one more match for it to go to the finale. So I'll be going to Silent Night again this year. And that should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward. I think the season's going pretty good so far. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the finale. But then, so fast forward to it was stage one, which was our third to last stage. And it was, let's see, there was 5 or 6 tires and there were 2 targets, one at like 550 and one at 650. And these tires sucked. They were very bouncy. I knew that. And they weren't like real soft. They were piled on. And so like the top one, if you leaned into it, it would rock. And so a lot of guys were running tripod rear, a plate bag and tripod rear. And because my tripod rear stage had not gone well the day before, I hadn't had time to really fine tune the bag, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to bag it. I can figure out how to do this. So then, but moving 5 positions and a near far, that's a lot of movement. And so some guys were bagging, some guys were dialing, some guys were holding over, some guys were doing the tripod rear. And it was one of those deals. I didn't feel confident that I would move quick enough through everything using tripod rear to get through it without timing out. And I'm not well, I did all right, so I don't know. I didn't hold over. I decided to dial. I ended up dropping 2 shots on that. The first target at 550 was a coyote. The second one was a turkey at 650. The coyote was decently wide, but he was not very tall. And unfortunately, it was the same stuff I was just talking about. The tires were bouncing. And so I sent one shot that went just under the coyote, and I missed one just over the top of it. And it was just from my reticle bouncing from the tire, the weight of me and my gun and all that. It was just enough that I was wobbling over it. And so again, just tips for shooting off of tires and some things like that. But then, so we finished up, and Nathan Tungate was 2 squads behind me. And we'd all been watching live scoring. And the way that the range is set up, stage 1's over here, stage 18's over here. And they were shuttling people on a trailer back over here to stage 1 once you finished 18. Well, because he had finished or shot 18 and was getting trailered back over here, he was in a 3-way tie for first, and back over to stage 1 and set up. The other 2 guys that he was tied with had already completed their other 2 stages and finished up. And so he knew that he had to clean his last 2 stages of the match just to maintain and stay tied with him. And one of them was that tire stage, and the next one was a troop line of 5 targets, 2 shots each, 2 positions off a rock. And the tire stage was difficult because of time and position. And the other one, the position was really easy, but with the way the wind was at the time, it was it was up and down. It was just tricky. And that troop line, it wasn't a big pan, but it ended up panning probably like 15 degrees and went from like 300 to like 870 yards. So it was just a lot to keep up with. And and I actually didn't know all of this information at the time, but I'm putting this all together now. So Nathan came up and was asking me how I did it. And I was giving him all the information, and he was going to run a tripod rear, which is the smart choice. I just didn't feel confident in doing it. And so I was kind of giving him all the information to try and, help him. And then I found out when he got it to the stage, he asked the RO, like, hey, how many people have cleaned this stage? And she's like, 4. And he's like, oh, great. And how many have cleaned it using tripod rear? And she's like, none. And he's like, okay, awesome. I have to clean this, and I'm doing tripod rear. And lo and behold, the dude cleans it. I mean, hats off to you, dude. That's impressive. And so we finished up, and I wanted to sit around. I wanted to watch to see how he did. So Nate, I think he was actually like the last shooter for his squad too, which just freaking sucks. The anticipation that dude had to be feeling, like it must have been nuts. And so, but I got to film, I got to film him shooting his last stage, and I'll have that up later. But the dude gets up, cleans the last stage. I mean, just like a freaking machine. Just it was awesome. And when you see the video, you'll know what I'm talking about when these guys get into this flow state. I mean, the guy, it was just like a mathematical equation taking a life form, and it was cool. Cleaned it, absolutely crushed it, and tied. There's a 3-way tie for first, and they settled it from the tiebreakers. So it's just, dude, hats off to you, Nate. Like I was so impressed with that. Nate's a good dude and a hell of a shooter, and I love seeing another Texas guy doing well. So, dude, hats off to you. And it was cool to be there and get to watch you do it. So, big congrats to that. Congrats to Austin Bushman for winning. Glad to see you're not totally washed up and still out there shooting pretty good. Hats off to you, buddy. You shot very, very, very well. But yeah, it was a super fun match. I love catching up with everybody. And then I picked up a Vortex Ace off the prize table. I've been wanting to mess with one of these since they came out, and I have been messing with it a little bit. So far, I think it's definitely an interesting deal. They have some pretty cool features, especially when you start pairing them with the other pieces of the system that Vortex uses like this software. So like their Talons and the Impact 4000. I have the Talons. That's what since I got them, I've been running them, and honestly, I freaking love them. But pairing those with this, there's some tips and little tricks that I've heard about that I'm going to start messing with that I think will be pretty neat, especially for like hunter style matches. And so yeah, but that'll be fine. I'll keep y'all posted on the Ace. But thank you Vortex for supporting the matches, is supporting us and supporting everything that y'all do, because Vortex is everywhere. And and on at the King of Coal Canyon, I actually picked up a Vortex Strike Eagle off the table as well, and that's going. I'm really stoked. That's going on my first bolt gun that I ever built or that I ever got, and I got it as a graduation present from college from my parents, and it was that and a scope, and it was a Remington 700 SPS 308 or SPS Tactical and 308, a 20-inch little bull barrel 308. And I think at the time I put like a Nikon Monarch like 3 to 9 or 4 to 12 BDC on it or something like that. And I shot the crap out of that thing. I love that gun. But as time has progressed, the only thing original on that gun anymore is the action. But I'll never get rid of it because it was my first rifle, and my parents got it for me. But I sent it off. God, this has been a while, but I sent it to GA Precision. They blueprinted the action, and I put another 308 barrel on it. That's a little longer. It's a Bartlett, and it's in like a KRG Bravo, and I've got, I think, a Trigger Tech special in it, and then I have my like original, my first suppressor is a Silencer Co Spec War. I've got that on it, and so, and I had pulled the scope off of it a while back because it's my only right-handed rifle that I own, because back then the left-handed options sucked, but I'm stoked to have a scope to get it all finished back up. So, but anyways, big thank you to Vortex for their support at the matches and everything that they do. And but yeah, this will be fun. And I do really want to get one of the Impact 4000s and mess with this like link system between all three. I think that would be pretty cool. But I'll keep y'all in the loop on that as it all goes. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this week's episode. I hope you like it. Let me know what you thought of the episode, and if you have any thoughts on like the mental side of it, staying in it and progressing, through your shooting career. But I love you guys. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.